12 years in, I was still buying fertilizer by the pallet and feeding fish I couldn't afford to keep. I had 14 acres under production and 2 living systems sitting 50 feet from each other that had never once done a single thing for the other. The fish made waste. I paid to remove it. The soil needed nitrogen. I paid to supply it. Same substance, 2 separate checks. Most growers think that's just the cost of doing this. It isn't. It's a design problem. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. 22 years on this ground. I run 14 acres outside the Willamette Valley. Brassicas, alliums, salad mix, winter squash, and a rotating cover crop program I've rebuilt from scratch 3 times. I've kept fish in everything from 50-gallon tubs to a quarter-acre lined pond. I've crashed systems badly enough to lose entire grow beds to ammonia. Killed a full stock of tilapia in August because I rushed a stocking ratio I knew better than to rush. I've also run 3 consecutive growing seasons now without buying $1 of fish feed or synthetic fertilizer. So this isn't theory. This is what the land taught me, slowly, the hard way. The first thing I want you to understand is that this problem, fish costs money, garden costs money, both systems bleed inputs, is not a biology problem. The biology hasn't changed. Fish produce ammonia-rich waste every single day. Plants need nitrogen every single day. Those 2 facts have been true since the first carp swam through the first flooded paddy, thousands of years ago. What's changed is who profits from you not connecting them. Farmers in Japan, China, and across Southeast Asia figured this out. So long ago, the records are difficult to fully trace. Toyama Prefecture in Japan has documented continuous integrated rice fish farming for over 400 years. Families flooded their paddies, introduced carp and crucian fish, and watched what happened. The fish moved through the water column eating mosquito larvae, water beetles, algae, weed seedlings, anything competing with the rice. Their waste dissolved directly into the root zone of the crop above. The rice canopy shaded the water, kept temperatures stable, cut evaporation. Fallen plant debris settled to the pond floor and fed the aquatic worms and invertebrates that the fish then ate for protein. The system produced both rice and fish in greater quantities than either could produce alone, with fewer inputs than either required separately. That's not folklore, that's ecology, and it operates the same way today in a 100-gallon stock tank on a patio as it did in a flooded paddy in 1600. The reason most of us don't run it this way comes down to what happened when food production industrialized. Feed companies needed fish farmers buying feed. Fertilizer companies needed growers buying nutrients. The simplest way to guarantee that was to separate the 2 systems, make them different industries, different supply chains, different categories of hobby entirely. It worked. Most people with a fish tank and a garden have never once thought of them as a single system, because nobody selling them anything has ever suggested it. I ran 2 separate systems for 11 years. I grew brassicas and salad mix on 8 of my 14 acres. I fertilized on a schedule, logged input costs like any serious operation. My fish setup, a 1,200-gallon lined pond and 2 300-gallon grow tanks, ran on commercial pellet feed and a filtration system that cost me more in electricity than I like to admit. I tracked both, knew my numbers cold, and the numbers told me I was slowly bleeding on 2 fronts. Year 12 is when I finally stopped asking what each system needed and started asking what each system produced that the other one needed. The fish were producing ammonia. My crops were starving for nitrogen. The fish tank was generating heat and organic waste I was pumping away and discarding. My grow beds were dry and static and entirely dependent on what I carried to them. Well, when I laid it out like that, not as 2 systems, but as 2 organisms with complementary needs, the connection was obvious. Embarrassingly obvious. I had spent 11 years not seeing it because I'd been trained to see a pond and a field as separate categories. Here's how the loop actually works. I want to walk through every link because each one matters. Fish eat insects. That's the foundation of the protein loop. A mature system, one that's been running long enough to establish real habitat, generates mosquito larvae, water beetles, midges, aquatic crustaceans, continuously. In my 1,200-gallon pond through summer, the insect biomass runs substantial enough that I've stopped supplemental feeding entirely between May and September. The fish are fat and growing on what the water produces. I've tracked the growth rates. They're comparable to my fed periods. The system is making its own protein. Fish produce waste, immediately, continuously, every hour they're alive. That ammonia moves into the water column and gets absorbed by root systems, the roots of whatever's growing in the connected grow bed. In my setup, that's kale, chard, salad mix, and a rotation of brassicas through the cold months. The nitrogen load from my pond, measured at the inlet to my main grow bed, runs equivalent to a standard diluted liquid fertilizer application. I stopped buying fertilizer for those beds in year 2 of running the integrated system. The fish are fertilizing them, constantly, for free. Plants shelter the fish. This is the part that surprised me most once I started paying real attention to it. A canopy over open water, whether that's rice over a paddy or climbing beans trellised above a stock tank, drops water temperature by measurable degrees on a hot day. I've clocked a 4-degree difference between my shaded tank and my uncovered holding pond in July. 4 degrees matters when you're keeping fish through a Pacific Northwest summer that's gotten unpredictably warm. Beyond temperature, root systems hanging into the water column oxygenate at the soil interface. Falling leaf matter feeds decomposers on the pond floor, which feeds the fish, which produces more waste, which feeds the plants. Nothing in this loop is passive. Everything is working. Now let me tell you where I went wrong, because I've made every mistake this system allows. My first crash came from the stocking ratio. I was impatient. I'd read the guidelines. I knew the numbers, and I stocked heavy anyway because I wanted to see the system perform. 1 inch of fish body length per gallon of system water is the ceiling. I ran closer to 1.5. 6 weeks in, my water turned yellow, then green. Then I lost 14 pounds of fish in a weekend to an ammonia spike I could have avoided entirely if I'd just waited. The biological filtration in grow bed media, the bacterial colonies in the gravel that convert ammonia to usable nitrate, takes 6 to 8 weeks to mature. You cannot rush it. I knew that. I ignored it. I paid for it. The second mistake was skipping insect habitat. I connected fish to plants and called the system done. Without a zone of organic debris, mulch, and aquatic plant cover where insects can actually breed and accumulate, your fish depend entirely on supplemental feed. You've built a prettier version of the same dependency you were already running. The fix is simple, but it requires intention. Deep mulch at the pond margin, floating plants, water hyacinth, water lettuce, and a half-submerged log or bundle of brush at the tank edge. That organic zone is where the protein loop starts. Build it before you add fish. I built it after, which meant I fed commercially for a full additional season while the habitat established. A full season of unnecessary costs I could have skipped. The third mistake was no winter plan. My first integrated fall, I harvested the summer surplus, did nothing intentional to prepare the system for cold, and came back in March to a rebuild project instead of a running system. And now I spend 2 weekends every September doing nothing else. I harvest seed heads, ferment surplus plant material for spring soil amendment, decide which fish overwinter in place, and which come into the basement holding tank. My cold season grow bed shifts to kale, spinach, mosh, and watercress, all of which produce through temperatures that shut down warm season crops entirely. The system slows. It doesn't stop. That distinction took me a full year to understand, and it's worth understanding before your first October. Now let's address the questions I get most often, because I know what you're thinking. You don't have 14 acres. You have a patio. Good. A 50-gallon half barrel and a single grow tray runs a functional closed loop. 10 goldfish tolerate high-density stocking better than most species. A tray of lettuce and herbs fed by their waste produces continuous harvest through the growing season. You're not building a farm. You're building a relationship in the footprint of a small table. What about winter? Cold hardy fish, goldfish, koi, common carp, drop to low metabolism below 50 degrees Fahrenheit and require almost no feeding. The system slows with them. Shift the grow bed to cold-tolerant greens, and it keeps producing. If your winters are severe, move the fish tank indoors. A basement, a garage, the loop still functions at reduced output. What you fermented and stored in August carries you through February. You built the surplus. You draw on it. You want real numbers. A correctly stocked 100-gallon system in a temperate climate produces 8 to 12 pounds of harvestable fish per year. The connected grow bed produces 2 to 3 pounds of greens per week through the growing season. That's real food from a footprint smaller than a parking space. Initial setup, tank, grow bed, pump, media, fish, runs between $150 and $250. Return on investment arrives before the end of year 2 if you're consistent and don't repeat my stocking mistake. Time matters too. I spend about 20 minutes a week managing my system now. Checking water clarity, harvesting greens, trimming roots when they crowd the bed. Compare that to the hours I logged hauling fertilizer, troubleshooting nutrient deficiencies, managing a fish tank that never quite balanced. 20 minutes. The system does the rest because the relationships are doing the work I used to do manually. Here's what I want to leave you with, because it's the thing that took me the longest to actually believe. You are not managing inputs and outputs. You are managing relationships. The fish aren't a cost center producing waste you have to deal with. They're a fertility engine. The plants aren't a crop demanding nutrition you have to supply. They're a filtration system and a temperature regulator doing work you'd otherwise pay electricity to replace. The insects aren't pests. They're protein. Somewhere in Toyama Prefecture right now, a family is harvesting rice from a paddy that has been running this exact loop for 400 years. The fish below the surface are the same species their great-great-grandparents stocked. The insects cycling through the flooded soil are the same insects. The ammonia converting to plant nitrogen in the water column is the same chemistry. Nothing about the biology has changed. The only thing that changed was whether you were positioned to see it as one system or two. You're one growing season away from never buying a single input again. Build the insect habitat first. Stock the fish at the right ratio. Connect the grow bed. Give the system 6 weeks to find its balance. Then step back and let 2,000 years of proven ecology do the work your fertilizer bill used to do. The circle closes. Fish waste becomes plant food. Plants become insect habitat. Insects become fish food. Fish produce more waste. It was working before you were born. It will work long after this growing season ends. All you have to do is stop designing two half systems and build the whole one.